Now, the last few weeks we've been using the Pratyabhijna Hridayam as the backdrop for our discussion. And that's a perfectly appropriate way to describe it, because the Pratyabhijna Hridayam was in fact written as a kind of guide to people who were teaching the topic, and, for the purpose of reminding them of all the things that need to be covered, kind of providing a general outline that could go on in some very detailed ways. The Pratyabhijna Hridayam is an 11th century text by an author named Shamaraj, who claims to be a disciple of Abhinavagupta, but is in fact never mentioned in any of the lists of Abhinavagupta that Abhinavagupta gives of his own disciples. So God only knows what that means. So we come to Utpaladeva, who is the great grand guru of Shamaraj, the grand guru of Abhinavagupta, and the author of the Ishvara Pratyabhijna Karikas, which is perhaps the most rigorous and sophisticated philosophical statement, maybe in the history of the world, but certainly in the history of South Asia. Utpaladeva wrote this work in a format that is called Tarka Shastra, which is traditional to India, was well established in the early 10th century when Utpaladeva wrote, and was considered to be the appropriate format for presentation of highly scholarly and rigorous work. And so the Ishvara Pratyabhijna Karikas are I use the term, they're a beast, is what I want to say. I mean, they're very challenging and dry and attempting in the style of Tarkashastra to present all of the possible objections to the arguments that are being made and to rebut those possible objections. And it is an extremely comprehensive work that is brilliant and has, been honored and praised ever since it was written. Then, after Utpaladeva has written this work, which is the essential philosophical presentation of non-dualism and the solitary existence of subjective awareness, he turns to and writes a completely different work, exactly polar opposite of the presentation of the Ishvara Pratyabhijna Karikas. He writes the Shivastotravali. And this is extraordinary because he argues, in contrast, by the way, to Abhinavagupta's argument, he argues that it isn't knowledge that is the supreme pathway to self-realization. It is devotion Abhinavagupta argues it's that knowledge is the most important thing. Utpaladeva in the Shivastotravali is saying, devotion is the most important thing. And without devotion, well. So I find this and we'll talk about without devotion what, but this is a remarkable demonstration in my view. And not just in my view, it's a remarkable demonstration of the range of intellectual and spiritual curiosity and ultimately intellectual and spiritual maturity that Utpaladeva can rise up out of this extremely rigorous academic background and make such a statement. Spirituality is ultimately not rocket science. It is incredibly simple. It is the incredibly simple bringing into focus for ourselves why we are in this world to begin with. Have you ever had the thought, what am I doing here? And it could be anywhere, but you could be in a bar or at a dance or in your bedroom. What am I doing here? Spirituality answers that question incredibly simply. Real spirituality answers that question incredibly simply. What we are doing here is growing. We are in this world to grow. That's simple. And I like that simple answer a lot because you can use that simple answer to orient yourself in any circumstance that you ever find yourself in. I am here to grow. And of course, yes, that's simple enough, and it's not completely clear still what to do. In other words, the next question is, well, how do I grow? And spirituality answers that as well by telling us that we need to take in everything, and holding all experience in our mind and heart as purely positive. We are absorbing and digesting the energy of every experience and transforming it into gratitude and wisdom. And the process of that transformation of all experience into gratitude and wisdom is called devotion. It's called devotion. It's our pathway to growing that we have to, at some point in our life, come to the place where we accept that it is to be done every day. And not just 10 minutes or 30 minutes or 50 minutes a day. It is to be done all day, every day. It is the very essence of our purpose in life. And Utpaladeva, there are lots of people in the world, and, to some degree, I say to a very minor degree, me included, who are trying to sell people, lots of information and knowledge and scriptural, information based on scripture. It doesn't matter which scripture, the Bible, the Quran, the Agamas, the Vedas, the Upanishads. And, I love it that Utpaladeva, who, has this, by the time he writes this work, this enormous reputation in India, throughout India, he is basically rising up to say, well, yeah, but, all of that actually means almost nothing. How wonderful for him. Spirituality is really very simple. And the process of demonstrating devotion as we cultivate gratitude and wisdom brings us to an appreciation of exactly what this world is and exactly how we are, to understand it, which eliminates an enormous amount of stress and trauma from our life experience and allows us the strength and the confidence to live resolutely, to live fully committed in our process of growing, in which we are taking in all of our experience on every level and transforming it into gratitude and wisdom. It's that simple. It's, and to put it into, just to shift gears a little bit and to put it into a more culturally appropriate context, it is that devotion, that process of growing, that transforms our experience of life from a living hell. And that transformation in this cultural context, the word is salvation. We find our salvation, praise the Lord, and Utpaladeva is praising the Lord. We find our salvation in and through devotion, which transforms all of this shit show that we are living in, I should say transforms this experience of a shit show that we are living in into an appreciation for, an acute appreciation for the beauty and the love and the quality that is available to us in our environment, and turning our attention to it and developing and cultivating our capacity to appreciate it, it naturally becomes an ever-increasing, aspect of our daily life. We live daily lives in beauty, appreciating beauty, growing beauty, sharing beauty, being beauty. And it is this growing, sharing, being beauty that transforms us from a limited lunkhead of a human being into, a divine being capable of living in the dimension which is at once human and yet completely transcends all of the unfortunate aspects of humanity. So now I will read to you the first of the hymns. Da-da-da-da. Maybe I should start letting somebody else read this, but The Pleasure of Devotion is the title of the first song. The pleasure of devotion. We praise the one who is filled with devotion, who meditates not, nor recites by the rule, and yet without any effort at all attains the splendor of Shiva. Though my soul is young, drinking the nectar of your devotion, that means devotion to you, it is yet as one gone gray with hair whitened by the dust along this journey through the world. Meaning suddenly I have become through the drinking of devotion to you, through that nectar, I have become, an old and wise soul. Even the path of worldly living becomes blissful for the devotees who have obtained your blessing, O Lord, and who live inside your realm. When everything in the world is in your form, how could there be a place not suitable for the devotees? Where in the world does their mantra fail to bear fruit? Triumphant are they, intoxicated with the celestial drink of devotion. They are beyond duality, yet retain you as the other. Only those who are immersed in the joy of fervent devotion know the essence, O Lord, of your boundless ocean of bliss. You alone, O Lord, are the self of all, and everyone naturally loves his own self. Thus, victorious becomes the one who knows that devotion is inherent in all. Lord, when the objective world has dissolved, through a state of deep meditation, you stand alone, and who does not see you then? But even in the state of differentiation between the knower and the known, you are easily seen by devotees, just as Devi, your most beloved, endless pool of bliss is inseparable from you. So may your devotion alone be inseparable from me. The path of the senses is threefold, marked by pleasure, pain, and delusion. For the devotee, this is the path that leads to your attainment, the path of the senses. The highest state of intellectual knowledge has none of the taste of the nectar of your devotion. To me, O Lord, it is like sour wine. Those who practice the exalted science of your devotion are the only ones who truly know the essence of knowledge and ignorance alike. May this vine of speech, steadily rising from the root, everywhere adorned with blossoms and sprinkled with the nectar of devotion, yield me fruit abundant with that sentiment. One should worship Shiva by becoming Shiva is the old saying, but the devotees say one should worship Shiva by becoming a devotee, for they can recognize your essence as non-dual even when it's in bodily form. What for the devoted does not serve as an instrument to attain identification with you? And what then for the spiritually inferior does not serve as an obstacle, leading to the failure of spiritual attainment? According to yoga, you are obtained at particular times in particular places. This is deception. Otherwise, how is it that you appeared to devotees, O Lord, under all conditions? Pratyahara, which means the withdrawal of the senses, and similar practices have nothing to do with this unique attainment. Even in what is merely a yogin's non-meditative state, the devotee acquires complete union. Neither yoga nor austerities nor ceremonial worship is recommended on this path to Shiva. Here only devotion is extolled. Within and without, let determinate cognition cease. Dispelled by the brilliant, glowing light of devotion, even the name of anxiety is destroyed so that I may have direct realization of the true nature of all things. With the single word Shiva ever resting on the tip of the tongue, the devotee can enjoy even the most complete array of savory delights. Who else is to be counted by those resting comfortably in the celestial bliss of the cool, pure, tranquil, sweet sea of nectar of devotion? Lord, maybe I should say Lordy, why should someone like me not taste the Mahasandhi herb of devotion? Mahasandhi means the most effective herb of devotion, whose natural extract is the cause of liberation. O Lord, the wise pray for those fortunes alone that nourish the capacity to delight in the bliss of your devotion. They have experienced inexplicable bliss in a downpour of devotional nectar. Even should they fall, they will not become soiled with the mire of false attachments and other such things. When it is ripened, the vine of devotion inherently bears fruits called siddhis. These begin with anima and other powers and culminate in liberation. How wonderful it is that the mind, O Lord, in essence, the seed of all suffering, when doused with the nectar of devotion, bears the magnificent fruit of beatitude. Ta-da! So, there's a lot to unpack here. The first thing I want to say like to talk about is what is one of the interesting things, maybe the most interesting thing to me about this text, is the fact that a person who was such a rigorous argumenter for non-duality, for the non-duality of all things, is sitting here using the terms you and I, which is the fundamental basis of duality. And I want to talk about that for a little bit and say that we have covered this topic in the Pratyabhijna Hridayam, but we're going to cover it again because it's really important to understand that Shiva, within this system, is space. Shiva is space. Shiva is space that is also awareness. Space and awareness are completely synonymous within the context of non-dual Shaivism. And the only thing that has changed over the ages that our understanding of space has been expanded profoundly. When this text was written, most of Europe, at least, thought space was, from the ground, from the dirt, up to the top of the dome, which covered the earth, and allowed the sky. And, beyond that, there was just, and above and below it, there was just more water. And we lived in a universe of water, which was separated by the dome that God built so that he could dry out the land and make some cool shit. Now Shiva is space. Space is aware. Space is awareness. And space is alive. Did you know that each cubic centimeter of space, I learned this from Chris, each cubic centimeter of space has a numerical designation for the quantity of energy that is within it. Space and energy are completely fused with one another. There is no such thing as empty. If there was anything at all such as empty, then everything would be empty, and there would be nothing, which there's also no such thing as. There's no such thing as nothing. And just as an aside, this is why I kind of think either Buddhist concepts were mistranslated, and that's perfectly possible, or unfortunately wrong, which I kind of doubt. I think that kind of the language was controlled by the powerful and sort of got pushed into. But I want to suggest that rather than nothingness and emptiness, if we switched emptiness for the word uncertain and uncertainty, we'd have a perfectly appropriate language that would eliminate the Buddhist problem of duality, and the inability to explain the nature of experience if there is simply an empty, nothing world. But that, I digress. Shiva is space, and Shakti is everything that is in space. Everything that happens in space, from the subtlest motion to the grossest, biggest, densest, most violent manifestation that happens in all of space. So far as we know right now, that would be a black hole. Everything is Shakti. And it is this dynamic awareness that through its process of self-observation, subjective awareness, through its process of self-observation, that gives rise to the appearance of everything, us included. And in us, it is well, I better back up and talk. And this dynamic awareness, observing itself, gives rise to existence and to things that appear to be separate within existence. And, it gives rise to fundamental organizations of existence that become the structure of what we see as first as the visible universe, secondly as galaxies, thirdly as solar systems within galaxies, fourthly as planets within solar systems, and finally, as living beings on planets. All of this is completely integrated, arising out of one dynamic awareness that it again and again and again and again and again, relentlessly dissolves into, rising up and dissolving. So, the ultimate mind, the ultimate realization is the mind of Shiva. And each of us, as the process, remember I've talked about two things in the Pratyabhijana Hridayam, which are completely essential to all of the Shaiva literary traditions, the agamas and the commentaries on that insight, which are later. Commentaries are like date from the Shiva Sutra onwards. They are attached to various authors, whereas the agamas themselves are not attached to any author. And this realization, this fundamental realization of the non-duality of all things is, first of all, laid out in the agamas, and secondly, it is commented upon by primarily Kashmirian authors, though later on, after the 12th century, the authorship becomes more diverse and spread throughout India. That all this literature talks about two things. It talks about tattva and upaya. Tattva is the cosmic process, and upaya is the realization of this cosmic process and our place in it. So, tattva is telling us that the mind itself, the mind of Shiva, this non-dual, dynamic awareness, has, through its own dynamic quality, become all the things in the universe and has become all of the diverse, apparent, differentiated subjects and objects. And it has done so without ever diminishing itself whatsoever, without fracturing itself, without becoming two. It is one, and yet all of this appearance happens within it. And so, the point I want to make here is that each mind, the mind of each human being, is really directly grounded in the mind of ultimate being, the mind of whichever gender you want to, whichever pronoun you want to use. The mind, I don't want to use the word it. It's not an it. The mind of he, she. There's only one mind, and each of our minds is grounded in that one mind. That's where our mind comes from. Our mind is nothing but the mind of God. Each mind. And our work, our upaya, is ultimately the stabilizing. All the practices are about stabilizing this mind until we have a purely positive perspective that allows us to see through all of the apparent differentiation into our own essence divinity. And the pathway for this that Utpaladeva is laying out for us here is a pathway that is basically suggesting that once we know that the world is an aggregation of resonances that is grounded in a single dynamic motion that I refer to as respiratory process. Once we understand that the universe is dynamic awareness that has manifested itself as space and motion and time, this dynamic awareness as our own essence, once we come to that, we have nothing to know. Once we have grokked to tattva and just know it as an aggregation of resonance, then there's nothing else we need to know. And the distillation of all the practices, in the Vijnana Bhairava, there are 124 meditations. What Utpaladeva is saying here is that the essence of all upaya, the essence of all practice is devotion. And the essence of devotion, I would go on to say, is contact, alignment, and flow. The essence of devotion is contact, alignment, and flow. It is through the understanding and the practice of contact, alignment, and flow in whatever practice form you feel the best about using. It is contact, alignment, and flow that dissolves our experience of duality as it fills our heart with the joy of, our own innermost goodness. And the joy of that innermost goodness, the goodest thing we got that resides within us, the experience of that dissolves all tension, it dissolves all trauma, it rises up inside us and is expressed in ourselves as gratitude, which facilitates, our process and our sharing of, in this world. It is contact, alignment, and flow. This is devotion. And over and over and over again, through the years, I have talked about, and even a couple weeks ago, we talked about Kundalini yoga. Kundalini is, the dynamism of the cosmos as it is manifest itself in each of us. It has a multiplicity of forms, but primarily as a spiral that is fluctuating on a rhythmic balanced interchange with itself and its total environment. And so, the primary method that I've always used to communicate, that I've communicated to you as upaya, is to activate each of the nerve plexuses in the body, which we can easily feel, and bringing our attention to and activating those nerve plexuses, discover that they are connected by channels, and cultivating the flow within those channels, we dissolve tension, allowing a flow within ourselves that we experience, that we feel as feeling really good. And this simple good feeling, through continuous cultivation, dissolves the trauma and tension structure of this physical body that continuously, reinforces our notion of our separateness. It dissolves that, and we increasingly are filled with what Utpaladeva calls the nectar of devotion. And that nectar of devotion, well, as he would put it, and I think this is really important. Okay, well, I'll get to that in a minute. I'm kind of sorry I'm swimming around in my own experience of devotion here. And I want to say that all practice, all spiritual practice, is really about quieting our minds to the degree that we can begin to experience our connection to the divine mind, which is the fundamental ground from which we have arisen. And that divine mind, which, whether it's in our bodies or outside our bodies, is the essence of space and the essence of time and the essence of everything that happens within space-time. It is that close to us that our own mind, purified by the nectar of devotion, reveals to us, the infinity of the ground from which we have emerged. Your own mind. It is by activating the chakras and the channels that we dissolve all that tension so that our mind is no longer fractured and we begin to appreciate the total unity of, observing and being observed. So, all upaya is ultimately about bringing our mind into a quiet place, the cessation of judgment, the cessation even, and Utpaladeva says it here, the cessation of all of this cognizing. I'd have to now go back and dig it up here. Okay, he says, within and without, let determinate cognition cease. And he doesn't mean, like, kind of, well, process it. He doesn't mean let determinate cognition be processed, because processing is determinate cognition. He's saying, stop it. Stop. That's what he's saying. Let it cease. It's like in the old Bugs Bunny cartoon, where Yosemite Sam is holding a gun to Bugs Bunny's head and saying, "Shut up," and Bugs Bunny's going, he says, "Shut up," and Bugs Bunny goes, "I'm shutting up. I'm stopping now. I'm going to be quiet now." He says, "Shut up, shutting up." Stop. Stop all of this, because determinate cognition is, what does this mean? What does that mean? What is this sensation? Where is that? What is all of this? All of it, down to its root, is to be stopped. It's a weed. And we are to open our hearts and minds accepting ourselves as we are to open our hearts and minds and take in all of our experience and refine it in an environment of devotion into gratitude and wisdom. You know how I used to hammer on the point about opening our hearts, 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 getting out of our heads, opening our hearts. Why did I do that forever? Opening our hearts. Because opening our hearts. And why did we do open-eyed class forever? Because opening our hearts and experiencing our connection to one another and allowing that connection to go deeply inside us, taking it in, holding it close, observing its the tides, its flow, dissolves the tension and reveals the first of all, the interconnectedness. It reveals our interconnectedness. And having the experience of, this is easy for mothers who have experienced their connection with their children. They understand there is literally a thread there. Now, it usually doesn't go much further than that, because the kids drive them crazy and they're trying to keep them from killing themselves, and so that creates more tension, not less. But this connectedness with one person leads to a capacity to experience our connectedness in all people, whatever appears in the field of our life, and seeing that net, seeing that web of interconnection, contemplating that interconnectedness, reveals to us in time, and in time the net dissolves. The appearance even of a net dissolves, and we see one living, dynamic, respiratory process, the breath of life breathing itself and manifesting itself in this light show of this rainbow of curtains. Curtains of light. is dazzling and beautiful and terrifying and stressful, and it is, all of the, as Utpaladeva expressed it, all of the savory flavors. Because, when you are grounded in your devotion, experience, because there is only one, and you're not defending something or, rejecting something or embracing, you're just resident in your own being, then all experience is just the wide variety of flavors which are available for you to appreciate. And because you recognize your own ultimate non-duality, there is no terror that can grip you. Having learned very well that all pain is temporary, we can attend to the beauty and enjoy the flavors. And enjoying all the flavors, our soul is nourished, and it grows and expands and grows and expands until it is too big to be contained in a body, and it rises up to become again the divine, pure being that it fundamentally always is. How wonderful it is that the mind, O Lord, in essence, the seed of all suffering, when doused with the nectar of devotion, bears the magnificent fruit of beatitude. The mind, in essence, the seed of all suffering. I think this line makes our work extremely clear. Bringing our mind fully into the domain of our devotion and focusing on, the nectar of loving and being loved, as the process by which all suffering will be eliminated. Makes our life and the process by which we grow extremely simple and clear. And Utpaladeva himself is saying, intellectual knowledge is sour. But drinking the nectar of devotion purifies us and illuminates, our true nature and the nature of the field of our experience. So, let me just refer back here to see if I have anything else to talk about. Within and without, let determinate cognition cease. Dispelled by the brilliant, glowing light of devotion, let even the name of anxiety be destroyed, so that I may have the direct realization of the true nature of all things. I guess that kind of throws a monkey wrench in all the buts that we might come up with. But, I need determinate cognition. But. All practices, all austerities, all doctrines and dogmas and everything can, are useful to the degree that it brings us into the experience of devotion, and beyond that, it's all an obstacle. Intellectual knowledge, is an obstacle, not a support. Once you understand the tattva, which is really simple, respiratory process aggregates and gives rise to particles, the appearance of particles, which aggregates, giving rise to the appearance of things, which aggregate, and yada, 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 only to, in time, dissolve back into their fundamental, vibrant, dynamic nature as the fabric of life itself, the consciousness fabric of life itself. So Utpaladeva is singing his devotion for the essence of all experience, and appreciating this essence of all experience as pure beauty. Pure beauty. Inspiring us to bring beauty into our mind and become purely positive people. To express beauty in our lives and to grow beauty in all the environments in which we transit. Oh, okay. Now I'm going to stop, and if you have questions, I will happily take them.
I have my family here.
Yeah.
And in relationship to send that experience, if the desire is just to dissolve the boundaries between those two spaces.
Okay, so the first thing is you have to root yourself firmly in your own open heart. And this is a challenge because as we experience all these boundaries, our heart fluctuates, and that fluctuation of our energy produces anxiety. And if we can't get on top of our anxiety, then that produces tension. And then our minds take off and go to the races and take us all kinds of places. So we have to be in our open heart. There are, in cultivating your open heart, there are certain things you just can't think about. There are rabbit holes you can't go down because they don't, maybe it's a real topic for you, maybe it's a real part of your experience at the moment, but you don't go there because there's nothing good that's going to come of it. And so, you root yourself in your own heart and you find your connection with your mother and your father and whoever else is there. And you savor what is available for you to savor with them, and you don't worry about what is not available. I never tried to force my parents to accept me, and I was never really expecting that they ever would accept me, and I didn't really care. What I did was I shared with them whatever it was that they could take from me. I shared with them happily. Whatever they couldn't take with me or about me, I didn't bother. And I accepted from them whatever they had for me, and what they didn't have, I also didn't concern myself for. Now, did I have the same kind of rich and profound experience with my mom and dad that I had with my guru? Absolutely not. I mean, not even like in the same universe. We're talking, eyedroppers to oceans here. But whatever they had, I accepted, and whatever they could accept from me, I gave. Lovingly, and without judgment at all, without anything. But for me, the dualistic view and the fear-based perspective on life and on other human beings that they actively cultivated in themselves through their religion was something that I found intolerable, frankly. Not in a negative way, I could not do it. I could not deal with it. The experience of it hurt me. It caused me more pain. I could not and do not live a life based on fear. I am not afraid of anybody's judgment. I'm not afraid of anybody's judgment. Everybody's judgment is their own limitation on themselves. And, we just have to accept it. So we are not in the world to change anyone except us. We are here to change ourselves. We cannot change anybody else. We can only accept what they offer with gratitude and give back what they can accept with love and kindness, and not allow our own minds to be kidnapped by, hijacked by, the tensions that we are constantly surrounded by in this world, and taken away from our, experience of our own complete and total interconnectedness, and not taken away from the experience of the joy of our own, vast and dynamic living process. The world is a painful place. This is my experience of it. It's a painful place. And I accept that. I'm not saying it anymore even that it ought to be different. I thought, originally when I was in politics and younger, that it ought to be different. Now I don't think it ought to be different. I accept that it is the way it is. But I do not want to become tangled up in all of the greed and the tension, the anger, the frustration, the competition, the complexity of worldly living, because it comes from nothing in guard comes from tension. It goes back to tension. It's an endless cycle of dynamism that is rooted in bliss, and I'd rather live there than in the tension of it and in the pain. So love your parent, love your family. Do the best you can for them while they're here. And, when they're gone, you can be grateful that you're not going with them. So, and when they needed me, I was there for them. When somebody else's parents needed them, I always supported them in responding to that need. It's important for us to love our families because our families are where our life has come from. And as a dimension of our loving our own life, we have to love our past. We have to. So. It's not easy. A lot of times. Wasn't easy for me. I know it's not easy for anybody. But this is, the path we have set ourselves upon, and the rising above tension and judgment into the experience of our own fundamental goodness and sweetness and the beauty that is available to us, that is the unimaginable possibility that this life is constantly presenting us, is where we want to be. And that's who we want to be. And we have chosen that, and we, as the Buddha put his hand down on the ground in the earth-touching mudra, as he put his hand on the ground and with the earth-touching mudra, he said, "This is where I will take my stand, and from this place I will not budge." We take our stand in the direct experience of the beauty that is within ourselves and possible in our lives, and in being committed, unshakably committed to that beauty and its expansion, we dissolve our minds and become completely one with the essence of life itself. That's the meaning of yoga too, is union. Union it's twofold. It's restraint. It's restraining our mind from going down any negative pathway. And in restraining our mind from going down any negative pathway, we create the opportunity for our mind to merge into the fundamental beauty from which all of this arises. And in the end, after all was said and done, when my parents came to the end of their lives, there was a kind of resolution that happened between us that was very beautiful. With my mother, that miracle was resolved through, that situation was resolved through the miracle of direct contact, alignment, and flow. And my mother, at her end, clearly saw that beauty. Oh, bravo. For now, we will stop.